along with the fact that he probably had wives as essentially like booty calls in various ports. So he could be like, I'm gonna go have sex with one of my wives now. It also was helpful in terms of like, if you got caught, you could sort of like have your wife show up with all of your kids and be like, oh, he's a good man, don't kill my husband, look at our babies. And so like he had like one of those in every port just to be like, hey, here's the missus.
Okay, you guys, I'm going to be real with you for a second, and I want you to analyze the meaning of this dream that I had the other night.
Okay.
It was a David Jenkins dream. I held for you guys to like go, ooh. But you
got the wrong audience. We've all had a David Jenkins dream. That's nothing surprising.
So it was the second David Jenkins dream that I ever remembered. And it was me and a person that looked like me, but was like smaller and more feral and dirty. Walking.
I have news for you.
Wait. Follow that statement up, Irene.
I don't think we could have someone more feral than you. I think that's your internal person.
Inside of you, there are two wolves.
Both of them are feral.
So this picture this small, like caveman little version of me with like muddy dreadlocks, like we're walking on this muddy path. And for some reason, I know that we're on an island, and it's not like a Caribbean island or a New Zealand island. It's like a Southern California island, like that genre of terrain. And it's very muddy and dried grass everywhere. And for some reason, I know that I'm on an island and I'm supposed to get to another island. And there's like a land bridge connecting the two islands. And I'm sort of like herding this little feral version of me. And David Jenkins is just there with us. And his girlfriend is there too.
She's hot.
They're just like walking along with us. So
I think this is the feral version of you is the Our Flag Means Death fandom. Yes. And, you're leading along into the season 3 that you think we're going to get when all this WB stuff goes down.
I like that. Let's live in Delulu Clownland. It's my favorite place.
I mean, this is, with all this that's going on recently, this is the most, I don't want to say hopeful, but like
Delulu?
I'm at least watching, you're doing great, sweetie, like from the sides at this, because this is interesting, and I do want the Max people to suffer. So
yeah, okay, that's true. If anything that we can agree on is that we all want them to be very sorry.
Yes. I don't need to win. I just need them to lose.
So you interpret David Jenkins' latest tweet, which was, we're all just happy he got a healthy bonus, which was the subtext. We want to give David Jenkins plausible deniability. Some may
I don't think David Jenkins wants to give David Jenkins plausible deniability. I think David Jenkins was real clear.
Yeah.
So the message there is David Zaslav, the head of HBO Max, gave himself essentially a huge like $50 million bonus. And while the company is going downhill. And if David Zaslav were a good CEO and were someone who maybe wanted to turn his public image around and turn his company around, if I were in David Zaslav's place, I would say, hey, how about you guys use my bonus to fund the 3rd season of this beloved show? And that way, everyone who's like hating on me right now would be like, oh, okay, we're going to be quiet a little bit. Because they
never do those things. They want to like dig themselves deeper.
It's very easy to ignore the haters when you have $50 million to do it with.
You can ignore them from a private island.
We're trying to make this less of a mockery of the ancient art of podcasting. I have realized that so many previous episodes, I have never introduced myself. I have never done the actual introduction of the podcast. So basically right now I'm going to say this is the Blackbeard episode of the Our Flag Means Fanfiction podcast. And for those new to the pod, the show is all about positivity, creativity, unseriousness, and ideas being generated started. My intention is that after you listen to the show, your brain will be exploding with hundreds of new creative ideas, and you'll dive into your writing or art or whatever you're doing with newfound enthusiasm. And if you aren't a writer yourself, this podcast will hopefully rekindle your love for the greatest series of all time. We're all polite menaces here. We talk it through as a crew. We turn poison into positivity. So no critiques or criticisms here. This is just about celebrating what we love. And if there's something we less than love, then we're just not going to say anything about it. We have a number of guests here today. We have Irene Adler. We have Di Booth, who is new to the pod. We have Ringa Sun, and we have Tessa. And since Di Booth is new, Di Booth, I would love to hear from you. What is the most gay pirate thing that has happened to you this week?
Well, pretty much everything in my life is gay piracy. I'm a little bit slow today because last night I co-run with my partner a goth night in Chester.
Nice, fun.
And so we were running that till 2 a.m.
And what happens at a goth party?
At a goth club night, we play goth music. It's not like we give away lots of free sweets because everyone likes free sweets, free Ouija boards. It's true.
Yeah.
And it's not explicitly like a queer night, but I think there's a lot of crossover with a goth and queer culture.
Absolutely.
Marginalized.
The Venn
cultures,
diagram of goths and gays.
Yeah.
Can't in the middle.
which is quite pertinent to Blackbeard, I think.
He is a very goth queer.
What
Right.
got
Classic
you?
rock queer.
Yes.
Yes.
And Di Booth, you're a writer as well, and you write primarily horror, right?
Yes.
What got you into the show?
Well, what got me into the show? Like back when I was on Twitter, I tended to get a lot of stuff come over my timeline about the most recent shows people are watching, and I got a lot of flag stuff and immediately muted it because it was annoying me so much, which I tend to do with a lot of shows, including so many muted tags on The Witcher. So then two friends of mine separately messaged me and said, you have to watch this show because you're in it. Eventually me and my partner checked out the trailers and stuff and went into it still not realizing it was like a gay show, just kind of assuming they meant there's a guy with long hair who wears leather in it, not realizing it was like this is the representation for like queer middle-aged men who, you know, didn't have support in their youth and look like normal humans rather than, no offense to Matt Bomer, but Hollywood abs and teeth and stuff, but everyone's very attractive in it, but they're normal attractive, and it's so refreshing to see.
Something that's fascinating about you finding our flag is you come across as very serious, dark aesthetic, very kind of gothic aesthetic. And the first episode of Our Flag Means Death is so silly and so Steed centric. And so when when Steed first enters in his frills and everything, what was your reaction as, your aesthetic is much, much darker?
Well, me and my partner are both kind of history nerds as well. And I've got kind of a background in reenactment costuming. So I was loving all the costume in it, really. That's kind of the first thing that got me hooked on it, and just really like Rhys Darby as well. And also what people don't realise about goths is goth is just the goofiest thing you can imagine. Like, we know that we look ridiculous. Like, everyone else assumes we're like, goths are all dark and serious and into, introspective and depressed, and we're just...
You're kind of like the embodiment of Blackbeard then, because you have such a dark aesthetic, such a goth aesthetic. You have the silliness and you're like, oh, I love Rhys Darby.
Yes.
Have you been able as a writer to bring what kind of emotional experience you've had with the show into your writing, or what you've learned from watching the show into your writing at all?
Yes, definitely, because it's very encouraging to see the response that it's had, that people want that. And I always try and write, like, when I first started out writing, I was writing other people's stories. I was writing like sort of cis-het couples, and like you do when you first start out, because it doesn't occur to you when you've been fed that your entire life. And now I'm just trying to write all the time, like every character, and just more and more and more queer rep as diverse as possible across all of the spectrum of queer identity.
Irene Adler, what's the most gay pirate thing that's happened to you recently?
The most gay pirate thing that's happened to me this week is on a whim. I am driving like an hour from me to go have leather boots made. This manufacturer, they've been in the US for 148 years and they are closing, and their last orders are the 31st of this month. And they make those preeminent like leather daddy boots that you see, and they make them to measure for each foot. So they do like a full measurement of your leg and your foot and all the different parts of you, and then they custom make them to fit you exactly. And I have wanted them forever. When I saw that they were going out of business, I just literally made an appointment. And so I'm going to a bear leather store. The only other place that was local to me, it's a little closer, but it's like a uniform supply. And I was like, I'm not giving my money to like a cop uniform supply. That's disgusting. So I'm going to go drive out to the bear place. And it was great because they said, oh yeah, come by anytime after noon. We will be there until 8. And then we have to go set up for the sex party. So it's going to be a fun day.
I can't wait to see what are your boots going to look like when they're done. Are they like over the knee boots? Are they?
So they are up to the calf. They're basically very similar to like the CHP boot, like the motorcycle cop boot. That's the one that I've decided to get.
Crazy.
It's going to be so sexy. And, you know, they've got like the little silver buckle on the back. They basically fit you like a glove. And I'm also going to be having some leather pants made eventually, but I have to decide if they're going to be black or if they're going to be purple or if they're going to be a mix of black and purple.
And Ringo, what's the most gay pirate thing that's happened to you this week?
I have been getting everything together for the Calypso birthday party that is happening next week, May 25th at Harold's Haunt in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I went to pick up a wooden clamp that is what is similar to what they put Roach's head in the Calypso's birthday episode. My friend who, you know, it's great to have theater friends, and this theater that I used to work with does a big flea market every once in a while, and they had one of these giant wooden clamp things. I don't know what they're actually for. I think it's not torture. I think it's some other thing, but they had one, and I was like super broke when I saw it at the flea market. But I was like, if that's still there, I'm going to buy it for the Calypso party. And it was still there. I emailed him and was like, hey, is this thing still there? And sent him a picture of Roach's head and the clamp. And he was like, yeah. So I went to get it, and he's very cool and lets me borrow lots of other props and stuff when I have weird themed parties, and asks me minimal questions. And,
questions.
He's just kind of like, yeah, well, whatever, you know, because he knows I'm just doing something weird. But I grabbed a bunch of orange trees they have there, and I was explaining the show to him, and he's like, here, take this, you know, leather wrapped bottle, and take this, you know, lantern, and take this, just everything that, you know.
Is he charging you for this?
No.
That's so nice.
Oh,
good guy.
Theater people are chill, especially in smaller community type theaters. You know, it's like nobody has any money. So, but and it's it's actually at a school is where this theater is, and it's summertime, so no one's using it anyway. So I went and picked up and stuffed my car full. Yeah, I have a harpoon now too. So there's so many good torture devices for this party. And I just walked into the bar carrying a bunch of it. The bar owner was in there, and she's like, "Oh, what? Someone else is in there, and they're like, this is normal. I don't know why you're thinking this is weird. This is so normal." Ringo walks in with a harpoon and an orange tree. But
I can't wait to see what people are gonna pose with.
Yes, it's gonna be so cool. And I posted like yesterday about like, hey, what's everybody's gay pirate thing they've done this week? And somebody answered me that is going to be coming to the party, and they are a member of Pittsburgh's Rocky Horror Shadowcast. And they're bringing...
What's that? Which Shadowcast?
So that's when a group of people will get up in front of where the screen is and act out the movie as it's playing behind them. And this happens at midnight A lot of places it's like every week on Saturday or whatever. I think here they do it every other week. But, it's this cast has been around since like the early 90s. It's really, really, very cool. And I'm a big Rocky Horror fan and very excited that they're coming. They're like bringing the whole cast with them to the Calypso party. And apparently they're somehow integrating Our Flag Means Death into their Rocky costumes. So they'll be coming to the Calypso party in like a mashup of Our Flag Means Death and Rocky Horror, and then going on to their midnight Shadowcast performance.
Fantastic. Tessa, what's the most gay pirate thing to happen to you this week?
Okay, so I feel like I would probably have a better answer for this if my brain wasn't made of cheese. But the first thing that came to mind was this past Friday. Well, I guess like the Friday before this past Friday, I had gone out with some friends of mine for one of their birthdays and kind of for my birthday as well. And so we were doing sort of some karaoke and we came out at like 2 a.m. And I, of course, insisted on walking home because I like walking home and I'm not afraid of anyone. And so they were like, okay, you have to text us when you get home. And I'm like, okay, yes, I'll do that. And I get home about, 2:30, and I take out my phone and I realize that I have just dozens of contacts with the name Sam. And so I'm like, fuck. And so I select one of the Sams, and then I'm like, no. That is the wrong Sam.
Because if you text the wrong Sam, that could lead to some big problems.
It's at 2:30 in the morning. I click the wrong Sam, and I'm like, okay, no. That Sam is in Montreal, and I'm not. So that Sam doesn't give a shit if I'm home.
They probably do.
So I go back and I scroll through my Sams until I find one that is Calgary based, and I'm like, okay, this is the Sam. This is the Sam. And so I text that Sam just like, hello, too many O's. I'm home. Done. Good. I'm out.
Please don't tell me it was the wrong Sam. Please don't tell me.
I brush my teeth. I wash my face. I get into bed. 3:20 in the morning, my phone starts ringing. And I pick it up, and it's my friend Sam. Like, bitch, are you home? What the fuck? So I'm like, oh shit, I thought I texted you. And I go and I look and I check. And the Sam I texted is in fact one of my senior colleagues.
Oh my God.
And so I then at 3:20 sent a follow-up text being like, oh, I'm sorry. That's the wrong Sam. She never replied.
But your colleague definitely knows that you're out at 2:30 in the morning.
I mean, it was a Friday. It's a Friday. It's May.
Amazing. I have to real quick tell you a very small story to go along with that. One time when I was working I'm a cake decorator, and my boss, his name is John, and a bunch of other people in the world are named John, and we were hanging out drinking at my house, and a friend of mine had said that her roommate John had just bought her some Cheez-Its, and we all wanted Cheez-Its. So I texted John and said, give me all your Cheez-Its, bitch. And it was not roommate John, it was boss John.
Oh no.
And did your boss give you all his Cheez-Its?
I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And he was like, okay. He said, I do have Cheez-Its, but they're mine. And he was very chill about it. But I was like, I just texted my boss and called him a bitch.
Okay, we're going to quickly get into fandom news. And the big fandom news for me is Rhys is doing a thing in the desert at 29 Palms. He's calling us out to the desert like an absolute cult leader. And Irene Adler, you're going. What are you expecting?
I am going.
Oh, what are you expecting? What are you looking forward to?
Well, it's amazing that Rhys is going to be there. We all love Rhys. Bobcat Goldthwait is also amazing. His comedy is hilarious.
Natalia Reagan is going to be performing as well, and I'm really
how fun!
So that'll be really fun. And I really am kind of hoping it'll be a smallish kind of intimate thing, because it's like it takes a lot to get people to go out into the desert.
It does. It's definitely, there's so many snakes out there, and they want us to go out like at night, which is strange. We're all old. But I actually, a friend of mine is coming in from Nebraska to go. Gail from the Daddies is coming in from Nebraska. She's going to stay with me. We're going to drive down together. We're going to see Bunny, who's again one of the daddies. We're going to
Nice.
drive down and stay with her. And yeah, it's going to be exciting.
I wonder what the vibe is going to be like because it's outside. It's like an outside. It's involving stargazing. Will we get to have any one-on-one interaction with him? I'm going to bring a digital audio recorder and record like podcast content driving there with co-host Tanya Dixon, and I will probably like shove a microphone in your face, Irene.
Perfect.
Like just get people's commentary on like how it's going, like what's happening.
You should get Bunny.
Yes.
They're both amazing. And Gail is seriously one of the happiest, most fun human beings on earth. And Bunny is a complete punk, just such a hardcore, amazing human being. So talk to them because they're going to be funnier and more interesting than I am by a lot.
And do you think it'll be like a situation where like Rhys just comes, does his show and checks out? Or do you think he will hang with us?
We don't know. It's hard. It is going to be a smaller group. So, that's in our favor. But he also is kind of vaguely terrified of all of us a little bit, I think. So
rightly so. Right.
Yeah,
depends on
beef,
how many
I
people
understand.
actually show up.
Yeah.
Because if it is
we'll
a small crowd, I
behave
think there's a
ourselves.
chance he'll hang out with you guys and stuff. But if it's a bunch of people, which this fandom is crazy and will, go out into the desert in the middle of the night. So if it's a ton of people, there's no way. But yeah, if it's a smaller crowd.
Either way, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah. I hope you guys see some aliens.
Oh, yeah. Don't leave me alone. What other fandom news do we want to touch on before we get into Blackbeard?
We're going to get into Blackbeard. Basingstoke was last weekend. So that was 4 of the actors hanging out and the star of the show, Cooper O'Neill.
Yeah. A reminder that came up to my head with Basingstoke and the opportunity to ask the cast, specifically Rhys Darby, questions. You guys, we need to all get on board with asking Rhys Darby his birth time so that the astrology girls out there can do a proper
that will definitely make him want to hang out with you in the desert
for him. I'm just
have your birth time for very normal, non-scary reasons.
Which is absolutely a normal thing. I mean, to go up to someone and ask, by the way, what time were you born?
I think that's more normal for Rhys to hear than what was it like making out with Taika?
Fair.
He seems to be a lot more geared towards let's talk about astrology. But
yeah. I feel like if you're hanging out with like queer people at all, somebody is asking your birth time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No, he might be into it.
Exactly. And he might be, if I ever have the opportunity to say, Rhys Darby, what time were you born? I hope he will be like, oh, by the way, are you into astrology? And I'll be like, yes, can I analyze your birth chart for you? And he'll be like, yes. And then we'll have like a whole, like I will do his birth chart. And then he'll be like, oh, wow, Carly, you're so smart. And then we'll have like an interaction.
I love that level of Delulu that we all have. Like every single one of us thinks that is a completely normal thing that possibly could happen.
Honestly,
just quietly in the back of your brain.
Yeah, I think your best bet for this is to approach him not as an Our Flag Means Death fan, but as a Cryptid Factor fan or just a general fan who has an interest in this kind of stuff and not bring up the pirate show. I think
just a general lunatic, not a pirate lunatic.
Right. No, he's into that. And I mean, not to say he's not into the pirate lunatics too, but like you said, there's a lot of us and we're intimidating. So I think if you come at him more as this,
drop like a Flight of the Conchords reference.
Yeah, do that. Nice. Talk to him about the Bird movie.
Tell him that you're doing a project on astrology signs and their percentage of how likely they are to be abducted by aliens.
Oh,
that'll get him.
That's it.
Just want to give you guys some scripts, some performances that you could do if you ever encounter Rhys Darby in the wild and the opportunity to ask this question. But it can be like, you could either be just like, hey, Rhys, what time were you born? Do you know? And then if he's like, oh, I don't know. And it'd be like, okay, were you born in the morning, evening, or night? If we get somewhere close, that's fine. So that's like the more like straight up, direct, slightly aggressive way, which might put them off a little bit. Here is another way that you could, that's a little bit more like a little bit softer. You could be like, hey, Rhys, big fan. Hey, for the Astro girlies who are your fans, we want to know, do you happen to know your exact birth time? And if he's like, I don't know, you could be like, do you know if you were maybe born in the morning or in the evening? Do you know if the sun was up or down? He'd be like, well, I was born at night. That really, the main thing I need is, what was he born at night or during the daytime? That's a biggie. If you can get before noon or afternoon, like that helps too. I can work with that. But the closer we can get to an exact time, if he says something like, oh, I was born at 2:00 or near 2:00, love that. However close you can get. And if you can do it in a non-threatening way, that's really important.
So clearly, like, the key is like to just have enough of us trying this in different ways until we find a way that isn't terrifying for him. And clearly the fact that like dozens of people are asking him like in slightly different ways
Super normal.
when he was born won't be unnerving at all in any way.
No.
Or he just listens to this podcast and, emails in and tells you.
Well, that is part of Carly's Delulu also, is
He can
that
send us his birth certificate.
I have so many fantasy scenarios in my head of his friends sending this podcast to him, and he's like feeling down one day. He's like, I'm sad, Rhys Darby. And his friends are like, you should listen to this podcast, the Steed episode, because it's 90 minutes of people talking about how much they love you. And he puts it on and he lifts his spirits. And then he listens to every single episode.
I
and
mean,
he's like, I love them. I want to be interviewed on their show. And
there were downloads from New Zealand when he was in New Zealand, and there were downloads from Winnipeg when he was in Winnipeg. I mean, that's basically solid proof. Yeah, nobody.
And there were downloads in London when he was in London.
Yeah, I mean, that's like 100% proof that someone in those places listened to this.
I also want to print out a little certificate that says Rhys Darby and Carly Heath, best friends forever. And then I want to have 2 blank spots. I want to sign one. And then I want to find some reason to encounter him in the wild and then just have it folded up so that just like there's this one line showing. And I want to be like, hey, can I get your autograph? And then he signs it. And then I will unflourish it. And it says, Carly Heath and Rhys Darby, best friends forever, and it has both our signatures.
Legally
binding.
That's bunny shit right there.
Best friend certificate.
You're making me feel very normal right now.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
we got to
feel
get
like
into
we
Blackbeard.
Just start like a bail fund, because I feel like it's going to be needed at some point. Just like half our paychecks go into that every month.
This week we're talking about Edward Teach, Blackbeard, and I want to pour Di Booth, who is our new panelist today, is not like into the fandom. Also very much like Tanya, who I interviewed the other day. Tanya, big fan of the show, big fan of Blackbeard, not into the fandom, not active on social media in the fandom, doesn't know what we're talking about half the time with all the fandom in jokes and stuff. So I definitely want to get Di's perspective. Di, what drew you to Blackbeard as a character when you first started watching the show?
Well, as I said before, it's like the whole identifying with characters who are finally just like older guys and they're normal and they're not Hollywood and a bit shit. And it's just like you identify with them. And that was really it for most of the characters, really.
Were you a fan of Taika before the show? Or did you?
I like his work. I really like how much whimsy and pathos he can put into projects that are often sort of quite depressing.
Yeah.
Including this one, really. But yeah, there's a lot of heart in his work, especially his earlier stuff, I think. So
the full range of the emotions and the intense autism of Blackbeard. Do the autism representation of Blackbeard, is that something that like any of us resonated with? I mean, I certainly did.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
I feel like I vibed with him more on an ADHD level.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that. Ed's more ADHD and Steve's more the tism.
Yes.
I'm focusing on all this brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
He can't sit still for like
Yeah.
a minute, and he's got to have like all the attention on him, and
And he's so bored.
he's like
But-
hurting and
So
bored.
I saw
And
a boring movie yesterday, and I walked in at the theater with my friend afterwards, and I suddenly found myself yelling, "I was so bored!"
Yeah.
Yes, so like I identify with that. The physical pain of being bored.
Kudos for sitting through it.
It was a near thing. I was like, my friend was like, okay, the seats around us were vibrating because I kept shifting and being like,
that is very Ed coded.
So what's our head canon of Blackbeard's backstory? Let's see, like as a crew here, if we can kind of share your perspectives on where Blackbeard came or where Ed came from, and then how he got to the place that he eventually is when he starts the show.
Like after the canon we know of his childhood.
Share it all.
Yeah.
And Di. I'm especially interested in Di because a lot of us have been tainted by the fandom interpretations. So Di, what's your interpretation of who Ed was and where he came from before meeting Steed?
I think I've not really thought too much aside from what we see in the show. So between killing his dad, I mean, did he go back home after that? Did he go to sea? Like, he was, 14 or something? He looked...
Very
I don't know. Like, working his way up through the pirate managerial structure, getting mistreated by Hornigold. I don't know. I think it's...
As a writer, what do you think maybe was the yearning of Ed's heart from that time after he, killed his father?
There's a lot of metaphor in the show, which is what I'm very interested in. And
Yes.
It was interesting, like Ringa saying about Rocky Horror and OFMD being combined. Like, there's parallels. I think something that draws me to Ed is like he's an absolute archetype as well, and kind of like symbolic of the queer experience of running away to sea and running away from this thing that you've done or you think you've done that's terrible, and trying to escape from that and trying to find your freedom and find your family.
Yeah.
So I think he just had a very long journey to that, and that's quite identifiable to, I think, kind of queer people, especially especially in Britain, of the age that they're portrayed in the show, when everyone's like childhood and like youth here was like kind of wiped out by Section 28. So you just had like a nothing, a blank.
Ooh.
And
What's Section 28?
So Section 28 was when the Conservative government passed legislation that you weren't allowed to educate about, or you weren't basically allowed to say anything about queer sexuality or anything in schools. So it wasn't even it kind of also coincided a lot with it came just after like the whole AIDS crisis and during the tail end of that. And it wasn't even so much as when you're a kid, obviously there's like playground slurs and everything and, oh, you're gay and all that. But it was bad. It was just nothing. There was nothing. It was not there. It was not represented.
And this is like in the 80s or 90s?
It was 88. It was brought in, which was the year that I went to high school, which was great. And then it ended the year I graduated, or a couple of years after I graduated from university. So that's like your whole formative years. Yeah. And that's an interesting thing as well. Sorry,
this is fascinating.
Rambling.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
But in the whole like music influence of the show, like saying about historical details in it, but it's not just historical details like golden age of piracy stuff. It's historical details like I am obsessed with the costuming and with what they've said about it was inspired by like queer New York from the 80s. And like when I saw Frenchie's jacket in season 2, it's like Hendrix desperately seeking Susan, and Desperately Seeking Susan. I loved that film when I was a kid. And it just seems to like encapsulate all of that from the time, the queer culture that wasn't explicitly queer, but it was the only thing that you had access to, and like how Ed is based partly on Prince. And when I was young, the only queer culture I saw was like the stuff on Top of the Pops, where it would be like Dead or Alive and Prince and you know, Mark Almond I was obsessed with, Erasure, all of those bands that they weren't out, like I didn't know, but
and then looking back on them now, you're like, well,
I had. Yeah, and obviously, now it kind of feels like that whole thing of seeing this now at my age, these men who are my age on the screen, and it's like that thing in Velvet Goldmine where Arthur's pointing at the screen going, look, that's me, look, that's me, and it just it kind of made me feel like a teenager again. Like really, really took me back and made me feel like this is what I needed when I was that age.
Amazing.
I just was referencing Velvet Goldmine earlier this week about the scene where they're making the dolls make out, because that's exactly us with this show.
And Di, as someone who loves costuming details, what's your favorite Blackbeard costume or costume detail?
Oh, the leathers. Costuming detail. Oh God, I've been working. This is how I also met Lacey, who's been on this podcast.
Oh yes, yeah, Lacey. We love Lacey.
Through a I'm gonna cough. Through a Facebook cosplay group, because I'm like, I don't cosplay, I don't go out and cosplay, and I was like, I'm gonna make this outfit.
Yeah, so you're making the Blackbeard outfit.
Absolute nightmare. I've really bitten off more than I can chew. So, Gavin, what's your favourite detail in that? It's like none of it. Pain it's caused me, and oh dear, the absolute fiasco and trying to get materials on a budget. And yeah, it's not like making reenactment stuff. But
I'd love to get your opinion on a favorite of many Blackbeard fans, which is the depression robe. There's the robe and he's depressed. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they're beautiful, those robes. I want one. Outside he's still in the dark, but inside there's like this softness inside, and I think it is like the overcoming toxic masculinity to like visibly be softer and have his more feminine side and be allowed to express that without being ridiculed.
We'll go around to everyone. What's your top 3 favorite Ed outfits?
Top 3? I don't know. I have just the one, and that's the leather. I mean, of course, I love him as Jeff the accountant. You know, do love that too. But I classic Ed in the leathers. You know, I love that.
See,
and probably because
I was going to be like, mine are Jeff the accountant is my number 1, then depression robe, then potato sack cat.
I see. Well, you know, that's I don't know. The depression sack gives me war memories, but and of course he's beautiful in the depression robe. But I think probably because I'm such a huge Izzy fan, the leathers are like what are closest to my heart.
You know, and unappreciated is when he is in the reform school, just the plain peasant with his face shaven and his hair down. That is an underappreciated wardrobe change.
Again, I think it's like very where his beard shaved and that is like the kind of boyish innocence of finding that for the first time. All of it's got so much metaphor behind it, and the kitty collar sack that everyone was sort of friends were like, oh, and I was how many cat boy comments are there this way? And there must have been loads, but I just saw that and went, he's returned as a penitent in sackcloth with a bell like a leper, and that can't be an accident, can it? Like, that must have been intentional.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of repeated metaphors of Ed being the cat and Steed being the golden retriever and Ed being the black cat.
I would like to yell about how he was made out to not be able to write in the first season.
Ooh, thoughts about that was a controversy that happened in the fandom, which was, is Ed illiterate because he signed his name with an X on that contract, And some people were like, no, he signed his name as an X in protest. And some people were like, no, he signed his name with an X because he's illiterate. And that was huge controversy. And so what were your thoughts on that, Di?
I was obsessed with it, and I talked to my friends a lot about that. And it's all sort of as well, like, how much of a reliable narrator is he? Because like he seems to lie a lot to kind of save face and kind of manipulate people. So I interpret it as, given the amount of books and stuff he had in his cabin and how he can play piano and he's incredibly smart and seems very educated, like despite his class issues that he has, feeling inadequate. I was absolutely adamant that he could write, and being vindicated with that when he reads the letter in season 2, I was just like, everything about this, I'm just like, Black Pete called it really smooth. There was talking about historical stuff. There's a historical detail that paper scraps were found in the wreck of the Queen Anne's Revenge.
Yes, historical Edward Teach could read and write, but that's like a whole separate thing from the show, because in the show we're given, very little is known about the real man's childhood. So, that could go either way. But what we see in the show with his upbringing, it really speaks to, I'm not sure that he was educated, but he is shown as being very intelligent, and that is something that he could have picked up in all of his travels and in all of
seems he was educated later.
Yeah. Whereas, historical Edward Teach, regardless of what exactly his family class was, he probably at least had the basics before he got into the life of piracy.
Yeah, it seems to me like the Ed that we see on the show is clearly very intelligent and clearly, playing the is that a piano or fucking harpsichord. Yes, yeah, playing the harpsichord on the ship and everything. This is clearly a person who is both interested in picking up a variety of skills and clearly very competent when he wants to pick up those kinds of skills. And so it definitely seems like the sort of thing where yes, obviously he can read because that's a skill that at some point or another, whether he learned when he was a kid or whether he learned after he killed his dad and got the fuck out of Dodge, it's definitely something that I think he would be like, this is worth my time to pick up.
I don't fault people for guessing that he might not have been able to, because that was also super common. So I don't think it was people made it out to be such a insulting thing, and I'm like, I think he can read, but also if he
it
can't,
would have been perfectly plausible, especially given we started out with this season with Lucius being like, okay, but I'm the only one other than you who can read on this ship, Steed. So we know that is
right.
You come to learn okay, Jim reads, and
right. Well, no one knew anything about Jim at that point. Jim wasn't speaking, and so who knows what Jim does.
When though, in retrospect, it makes his actions quite fascinating in terms of signing with the X. I kind of thought he's just doing that for plausible deniability. If he escapes, then how can they prove that that's his mark or not?
Yeah.
When you guys saw on the show Ed pick up that letter in the bottle from Steed and read it, and then we're confirmed clearly that Ed can read, what was your reaction to that?
Called it.
Yeah.
I don't know that I had a big reaction to it. I mean, It was kind of a funny scene aside from that, and I had assumed he could read anyway. So to me, it wasn't a big moment. It was just, he was strangling someone when he read it. So that was more impactful to me.
Yes. Yeah. I think this is similar to Ring. I guess I didn't even. I wasn't thinking about sort of the fact that there had been a controversy around it at all when that scene came up. So I was just like, he's reading a letter and strangling a guy. Haha.
Yeah.
I was just weirdly fixated on that detail. I don't know. things just
Yeah.
strike me.
A lot of people were.
What historical details do we know about Blackbeard? So you said that there were paper pieces strewn about the Queen Anne's revenge. Did you hear anything else related to that?
The thing that made me was really interesting about that to me was they found them as they were being used to tamp in a cannon, in the end.
Yeah.
He was like, fuck these books.
Yeah.
It made me think is this his book, or did he just throw them all overboard and use them for scrap? It seemed to, yeah.
I was thinking today earlier of when he's saying pirates don't bury treasure. It's just not done. There's 2 instances where it's referenced that pirates buried treasure, and Blackbeard is one of them. So that's another funny, haha. He was big on pageantry, Blackbeard.
What are some examples of actual historical Blackbeard pageantry?
In the beard? The
Right.
tallows in the beard. That's the classic.
So that's the classic, and we only know that he ever did that once.
It's memorable, though, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, you wouldn't forget. Shit.
He could have done it a whole bunch of times, just who knows, because records are so shitty
Garbage.
from that time, and people are embellishing on everything.
Do you guys think historical Blackbeard had any loves?
Historical Blackbeard had so many wives.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yes. Wasn't it dozens of wives?
16.
Oh,
Not dozens, still.
But that is not to say they were all at separate times. But
I'm guessing these are women on land.
yeah.
Are they all living together, or are they
No.
separate places?
It's
Different
just,
roles.
he had wives like people had booty calls
Yeah.
in different ports.
Oh,
You know?
I read something interesting about this. So most of my pirate historical knowledge comes from just being a weird nerd about pirates, and also a 10 years ago deep dive that I did when my friend and I were naming her very perfect one-eyed cat, who ended up named Sadie the Goat, after a 19th century London pirate who was known for headbutting her enemies.
That is cute. I hope we meet Sadie the Goat in season 3.
I fucking hope so too. She's everything. She has one normal eye, and then she has one weird tiny fish eye because she was feral and she had a rhinovirus and the eye didn't develop correctly. She's perfect. But okay, so one of the things that I read an article that suggested that, along with the fact that he probably had wives as essentially booty calls in various ports. So he could be like, I'm going to go have sex with one of my wives now. It also was helpful in terms of if you got caught, you could sort of have your wife show up with all of your kids and be like, oh, he's a good man. Don't kill my husband. Look at our babies. And so he had one of those in every port just to be like, hey, here's the missus.
He was the OG hoes in different area codes.
And they couldn't find each other on Instagram or anything either. So,
right.
So we know we're pretty sure historical Blackbeard and historical Steed Bonnet were a couple.
Oh,
so
well,
Blackbeard, bisexuality, pansexuality.
Okay, so we know that they hung out together. We know that Blackbeard was a lot kinder with Steed in a lot of ways than he could have been. We know that they got along well enough that they were together for a while. We don't know any more than that officially. Now, I, of course, think they had some kind of sexual component to this, but and we all know about metallitage and all the buggery and whatnot that goes on ships, and that's all legit. But just to set the record straight, we don't know for sure.
Okay, but wait. Let me add something here, because this is okay.
Yeah.
The thing is that I feel in a historical context where you have historians talking about this stuff and analyzing this stuff, I think that if historians saw a man and a woman behaving in ways, basically acting the way Blackbeard and Steed Bonnet did, I think that they would interpret that as a romantic or at least a sexual relationship.
I agree with you.
And I think, but this is the thing. And so I think that inclines me to just go, fuck it, they're gay. I mean, they're bi, but
I agree with that too.
Those men are fucking.
Yes, I agree with all of that. I'm just playing devil's advocate, reminding everyone that we know so little about the actual history and real facts. We know what
except that they were definitely
told people
fucking
at a bar who then told other people at a bar, etc. So yes, but I definitely do, because
we have as much evidence that they were fucking as we do that, like, basically anybody in history has ever fucked.
I mean, now, and
he was walking around Blackbeard's ship wearing his, dressing gown, and Blackbeard was like, "You don't have to work. You just hang out here."
Okay, but that was because Steed was absolutely insane, and he didn't want him to run.
He could have just killed him and took off.
Exactly.
And he's like, wear your dressing gown and walk around my ship and read your books.
You just have fun, cutie.
Kind to this weird, like, crazy person, where he could have absolutely just like killed him or just dropped him off somewhere, but he did a lot of emotional investment with him, as far as like,
and then the whole, like, he in real life, like, for whatever reason got mad with Steed, and then, like, marooned Steed's whole crew.
I don't think he got mad with him. I think he just was being a pirate, and he was
it was like there was like a falling out, and then they got back together. Like, that
wasn't okay. So yes, Blackbeard was cutting down the numbers in his fleet of people so that the treasure that they won could be split in higher numbers. So basically he was getting rid of people, and that's when all the ships went aground, and Ed on the Queen Anne went aground, people think on purpose, to be able to leave some people behind. Then we have Israel Hands in the Adventure, his secondary ship, came to help him, and it got run aground. And then we had Steed's Revenge coming along behind them. So after that, yes, they left a bunch of people. Steed was off getting his pardon for him and Ed, and when he returned, yes, a lot of them had been left. Now, that's what pissed Steed off. I don't think Ed was as much invested in the, like, emotions of it. I think he was just like, so now I'm going to drop these guys off and go do something else. And that's what made Steed mad. Now, if Steed had just gone on about his life from there, I started to say he'd still be alive, but he decidedly would not still be alive, but he might have lived longer than a year.
Oh, all else aside, I mean, I think we can say that historically, they were dicks, they were nuts, and none of them were in therapy.
Yep, absolutely.
Which we should talk about the show Blackbeard. Do you think the show Blackbeard was ever in love with someone before Steed?
No.
Yeah, probably not.
Or at least not in a way that he understood as love as such.
Right.
He was waiting to find the one.
And why do you think that? What evidence do you have of maybe his interaction with Steed that lets you know that this is a first time love?
I mean, among other things, just like the degree to which he absolutely lost his shit when Steed didn't show up. Like, that is very much I haven't done this before. I haven't felt this before. I have no fucking idea how to deal with this. And this is just going to be bleh.
Like
when
getting people killed and trying to suicide, destroy his own boat and all that. Like, that's wild. That's a lot for a guy you kissed once.
Oh, honey. I love Ed teach you borderline personality disorder princess. I love you.
Right?
Sorry, Di, what were you saying?
But when Anne and Mary say that you pair of 14-year-old boys or whatever.
Yes.
That's it. That is exactly it. It's like guys who were never allowed to be young.
Right. Because both of them, Steed had never felt this kind of love before either, obviously.
And so now they are,
Yep.
Now they're behaving like 14-year-olds because when they were 14, they weren't allowed to.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, I think there's something very sweet about that immaturity, but I think we see as well that there can be something dangerous about that immaturity as well when it comes sort of like in sort of an older person who sort of has more power as a result of that.
Right.
And
the power thing is it, because like he had not only just himself and his ship, but like Izzy is going to do whatever he wants, to a point. He's going to do, whatever Ed tells him to. And so that's a lot. They're wreaking havoc because of his, 16-year-old girl crush
Heartbreak. Yeah.
that is so real to him, but he doesn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
So who has Ed fucked before?
Everyone.
Everybody.
Everybody.
So we know for sure Calico Jack.
Yes.
Do
I
you,
wanted so badly for Ned
okay.
Lowe to be one of his exes. I wanted
Listen.
Ned Lowe to be one of his exes.
Okay, I'm gonna we don't know for sure Calico Jack. I know that Calico Jack said so, and I do believe it. But
okay, and also, but like
you gotta take
Ed's whole energy with Jack, the giggling and everything. Like,
I'm playing devil's advocate again because I just don't want anyone to think everything Calico Jack says should be taken, truthfully. As someone whose least favorite character on the show is Calico Jack, and real, actual favorite pirate in history is Calico Jack.
okay, we got to make this quick though. Do you think canon in the show Ed and Izzy had sex?
No.
I did for a while, but I think my attitude has changed about it after season 2.
Rapid fire. Who else do you think Ed has had sex with?
Everybody
Anne,
we've met.
Mary, like
all of them.
Anna Shacky.
The entire crew of the Queen Anne's Revenge, except
sure.
Izzy.
All his anonymous leather daddies.
See,
Yeah.
like the thing is, if Ed and Izzy had fucked, they couldn't have had the absolutely insane psychosexual tension entanglement that they did in fact have in the show.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is actually a good part to get into. If we were to do a season 3, what would you like to see from Ed/Blackbeard in season 3?
I would like to see him deal with some of his shit, like actually head on deal with like some of
therapy,
the trauma, and also like some of the repercussions of the things that he did in season 2, because he did some really fucked up shit.
And visually, what does that look like? Does that look like a specific sort of conversation? Does it look like Ed actually physically doing something, trying something, and then failing at that? What does that look like to you?
I think there are a number of ways to approach it. I think I would like to see, because I would like to see him actually attempting to make amends, and I think for him that probably would look like some very practical actions. But I would also like to see sort of like, because I feel like I'm not entirely sure that, for example, the crew would be sort of like totally prepared to just be like, okay, he's taking these actions. I don't know. I feel like he's like a gift giver. He's like giving us gifts and stuff. And I feel like there would probably be a moment of like, dude, you can't fix this by like giving us shit.
Mm-hmm.
And, we have to actually like deal with this. And so, yeah, I think I would like to see him sort of like
sit down each member of the crew and have a clumsy conversation where he tries to say,
yes,
sorry.
Yeah. And then to have that sort of going forward where you do have that kind of like tentative movement towards forgiveness, but without it just being an instant, okay, now we fixed it kind of thing.
I like it. What about the rest of you guys? What would you love to see Ed do? Even it could be a silly, you just want to see a scene where he wears a dress. I mean, I definitely want to see a scene where Ed wears a dress. What do you want to see in season 3?
I wanted Izzy to not actually be dead. They've buried him prematurely. He claws his way out of the grave. He's absolutely irate as hell because they have done this to him on top of everything else.
Buried him too early. He's alive.
Useless fucking fuckers.
Yep.
Confront each other with the absolute awkwardness of their last interaction. And because Izzy's had so much character growth, I can imagine Izzy just being like, oh no backsies. You said it. You said I matter to you. And Ed would just be absolutely mortified and having to deal with the fact that he said all this stuff, he meant all this stuff, and now this guy's still here and is now kind of living with him.
Yeah.
Tessa is flailing listening to what you're saying.
There's a lot of
what's happening emotionally for you as you're hearing this?
Just pure, like, effervescent joy. That would make me so fucking happy. It would be so fucking funny. Oh my god. And just like also like just I think that that would be like a really good way to sort of start actually kind of healing that relationship and just like doing it in a way that works on a comedy show where you have that awkwardness and that kind of tenderness, but it's also just like hilarious and fucking stupid. And the two of them just being like, I'm sort of moving my eyes side to side.
Awkward, yeah. Obviously, I think we all want Ed and Steed to reunite with the crew of the Revenge. What could be the most unhinged way that could happen?
I mean, they should definitely run aground again.
Yeah.
So like, oh yeah, so they're sailing off, and then like literally within like 5 minutes, they get turned around and they end up just like running aground at the other side of the island. Like, where are we? Oh my god! And then they're like hiking across the island, be like, oh, we've got to fun. And then they're just like back at the fucking hut, and it's Ed and Steed and Izzy, as Di said, and they're just.
But
like,
also, they think that they've landed on a completely different landmass as well, so they're really surprised when they see people.
Yeah, Frenchie thinks A, they're ghosts, B, they're like fucking doppelgangers or some shit. He's like losing his mind.
The idea has been that Frenchie takes over as captain. I don't think he has the experience.
No.
Zhang does have the experience.
Yeah.
Or Olu, who they voted captain in season 1.
Or Zhang or Olu. What if, I mean, Zhang is like, oh, you want to be captain? Okay. And lets him make all of these mistakes that end up with him just basically making a giant circle and ending up on the back of the islands.
That's exactly what will happen.
Oh, and like Zhang and Auntie, like anybody competent in the crew kind of knows that they've just done a big fucking circle.
Yeah. And they're all taking bets on like how soon it will, if Frenchie will realize it. No. How long Frenchie will continue to insist that he's going the right direction. You know, they'll all take bets on different things. And then when they land on the island, they're all just like trading money and okay. And then they're just like taking notes and we're just following him and watching him just fuck this up. And you know, Frenchie's like, we're gonna trek across this island and we're going to something. And everyone's just like, okay, Frenchie, go.
And at the end of it all, he will insist that is exactly what he meant to do. And you won't know if that was exactly what he meant. Hidden Depths, who is actually quite intelligent, like with his scheme.
He's smart as hell. I just don't think he's like leader material, at least not yet. I could see him as first mate. Like when he was first mate for like 2 seconds with Ed, you know, that had a promising future. Except that everything was crazy then, and including Ed.
Love it. Any final commentary or discussion points on Blackbeard? Because we want to get into pitching fics. And basically, Di, you are not a fan fiction reader, are you?
No.
So what we're going to do is we are going to pitch you fan fictions to read, and we're basically going to try and see if we can convince him to read one of these things.
I have read some.
Okay, that's good.
I've read fan fiction in the past.
Okay, good. But I like this because we have like a audience, basically you're our audience, and we're like gonna try and pitch you something that is just so entertaining that you'd be like, oh, I have to read that, you know. Yeah, so this is entertaining. But any final Blackbeard thoughts? Either historical, real, who you would like to see Blackbeard fuck at some point?
Izzy.
Is season 3, would you like to see Blackbeard and Izzy finally have?
Steady hands. Steady hands end game.
That's
period.
Or at the very least, maybe like an awkward hookup where they're both just like, this is not working.
There's so many good fanfics about that eventuality and fix-it-fix that take up, you know, after season 2. And a lot of the Canyon has just decided that the last episode of season 2 did not happen. And we go on from there. But
and to explain to Di Booth, so steady hands is the fandom terminology for the idea that Steed, Ed, and Izzy all end up together. And there's a lot of fan fiction related to that. What is, as someone who's kind of like outside the fandom, how do you feel about us saying Steed and Izzy are going to end up together?
I mean, I think people can interpret stuff whatever way it brings them joy. Like that's what the whole
thing is.
Like I've read things when my friends write them. I will read stuff that people send me links to, and like I think it's all really valid and really great that people take inspiration from source material and just carry on and run with it and take things into completely different directions. And that's the whole point of storytelling. Like, if people,
Yeah,
were that
definitely.
inspired by my work, I think I'd be really flattered. So
Yes.
I'm sure the creators of the show must be absolutely.
And that's also
chuffed
a
to
very
bits.
politician answer of you.
Yeah, it is.
What do you think about actually like a threesome between them?
Yeah, well,
I
wait.
don't love it personally.
Okay,
but
Okay.
we can tell you why you're wrong, but maybe not right now.
I'm
I feel like
very
this is one of those
invested.
things.
See, the three of them, no, they all have. Each side of the triangle has something that the other sides of the triangle
You don't need to
need
convince
to-
him.
Yeah,
I want to hear.
but-
I want to hear Di's feelings. So you were saying, Di, that you're
I'm
very invested in Gentlebeard
in
in
Ed and Steed having this really solid, very emotional relationship as a canon gay couple, like older men.
Mhm.
When everything I've seen in television and that is always, it's either teenage boys or it's like, again, Hollywood guys, and it always tends to be very, very hypersexual and focuses a lot on sexual relationships and, just like, oh, we're both hot and we've got abs, let's like get it on, that kind of thing. And you don't see romance very much between men in mainstream media, and that, I think that's what got me so much about it, is like they reminded me of me and my partner, and that's the closest I've seen to like representation of like an actual romantic, like loving relationship between two men. In the end, obviously not when they're trying to kill each other. But,
I think that
I'm very invested in that kind of as a romance rather than focusing on the sex side of it, which obviously is awesome. And
you need to read some Steady Hands, because they have the romance too. And I promise you that everyone who ships Steady Hands started where you are right now. We all were here just for Ed and Steed, and then we realized that there is another third different option.
But I love that we have the Gentlebeard representation here with that. Yes. And I stop trying to corrupt him.
I will not.
He's coming from such a pure place.
I will never.
Connecting so much because I'm monogamous, so I'm like, I want to see monogamy.
That's great for you.
Everyone should just go with it and like fill your boots. It's
This is the thing. I think it's so subjective, and it's like, because for me, like, Steady Hands is also like very romantic, and listen, I read a lot of porn, but it's not necessarily just about the fucking. It is this sort of like very nuanced connection, and about sort of like the three of them kind of healing together. But like, also, I can very much see how that wouldn't be as appealing to somebody who is monogamous and who does, as you do, see your relationship in Ed and Steve's relationship.
I do want to say,
makes a lot of sense.
Saying that, I'm not like remotely suggesting that like polyamorous relationships aren't romantic as well. Because I mean,
for sure,
there's great polyamory representation in canon on the show. So.
Yeah, nobody thought you were saying that. It's just.
I also have to vouch for Di, though. Di was extremely politician about like everyone little Steady Hands thing, but when he is like Gentlebeard, you're like trying to like convince him, and I'm like,
yes, I am.
Ringa is like the Steady Hands evangelist.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, it's like,
and there's the thing, like, it's not just about sex. We have emotional love as well.
I'm glad it exists. It's just not for me.
That's fine. I will never stop trying to convince everybody.
Okay, this is a good time. So I want to validate everyone's perspectives, but this is a good time where we will now shift into pitching the fanfics that center Blackbeard in some way. And you're going to try and convince Di to read this fic that you guys have in mind. So who wants to go first?
I actually have a Gentlebeard fic to recommend. This is probably the only time this will ever happen because I just simply don't read them anymore. It's like if Izzy's not in the relationship in the tags, I simply move along. So this was something I read way back in the day when I was first getting into it, and it is such a wonderful story. And like I said, if it was now, I would have gone right past it. So I'm glad that I did read this when I did. But for all you Gentlebeard people, this is a modern AU, but it focuses on both of them being historians. And
so modern AU means it's set modern day in an alternate universe.
Right. But in this story, both Ed and Steed are descendants of the historical Ed and Steed. So in this story, Ed is a salvage diver who goes down to shipwrecks and you know what we saw with the Queen Anne, and Steed is like a history professor, I believe, and he has this is set before like the Queen Anne was discovered, and Steed has some inside information that they're going to go discover the Queen Anne and get all the treasure out of it. They both are descendants of these actual people. And so Steed feels like it's fate that they both are doing what they're doing and that they can do this together. And Ed is like, yes, I will help you, aka go down and steal it all for myself, you know, and Izzy's his partner and etc. So, you know, but he's also very intrigued with Steed, and so it goes on just the way it happened in history. And it's very, very well written, and
And what's the title and the author?
It's called Somewhere Beyond the Sea, and the author is Claire Gregory. That's all one word. And I see that it's like 59,000 words, but it is now a series, which I haven't read any of the other things in the series, but the series seems to go then back to show historical, like, you know, pirate era Ed and Steed and talk about them. And then it seems to jump back and forth between this modern AU guys and then, you know, pirate era guys. So that's interesting. And I might I read more Gentlebeard? Who knows? It could happen. But very good story. I recommend it, especially if you like the historical stuff.
Cool. Di, rate that pitch on a scale of 1 to 10 of how interested you would be to read it.
You're gonna hate me, but I've read that.
So I would say that's a 10 in that.
No, it's
so
very
good that he's already read it.
My friend recommended me that and said shipwrecks, etc. And I read that.
Excellent.
Cool. Any others?
Tessa, do you have any?
Yes. Okay. So this one is quite short. I actually haven't finished reading it, but I've really enjoyed the first couple of chapters. Because I haven't finished reading it, I was just checking, and so it is explicit. So I don't know if that's a positive, a negative, a neutral. But so this is also Steed, Gentlebeard, what have you. It's called A Broken Old Bike by Ed's St. Augustine Snake, and it's quite short. It's only like 15,000 words. And it sort of like starts with Ed searching. He's like searching for a bike on Craigslist. And Steed has accidentally posted a picture of himself taking off his shirt while trying to post an ad for his bike on Craigslist. and so this ends up with the two of them meeting up so that Ed can get this bike, obviously, and it goes from there. And so far it seems, I don't know, it just seems very sweet and very silly. And yeah, I've enjoyed it, and I think that you might enjoy it as well. And this it's apparently based on something that happened to the author, where they went to post an ad for a bike on Craigslist and accidentally posted the picture right next to it instead.
Excellent. Amazing.
Yes. Which was actually a screenshot of Rhys Darby.
Oh no! You have to post that. You have to post that picture in the Instagram when this.
Let's describe the screenshot.
So it is Rhys Darby looking quite muscular. He has a mustache. He looks baffled, maybe a little frightened.
A screenshot possibly from Wrecked.
It's from Wrecked. I was just about to say it is. Y'all will know this picture. It is from Wrecked from season 2, I believe, when they're on the boat and where he's got his like captain's uniform on and he's got like half of the shirt off. If you guys have watched Wrecked, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Excellent show. It's not freaking streaming anywhere, but if you really want to see it, hit
There's
me up.
a
I can
Google
help you.
Drive.
Yes.
Okay, Ringa, do you have anything else to pitch?
I have one more story, and you're not going to like it because it's an Ed Izzy story, but so Steed is right out. But if I had known there was a steady hand skeptic in the midst, I would have absolutely been pitching nothing but steady hands. But this one's called Baby Will Be Fine by Oopsie Daisy, and that is spelled OOPSHIDAISY. And they write a lot of awesome things. I've read a lot of their work. This one's set directly after season 1, where Steed comes back, takes back over the revenge, and kind of makes Ed and Izzy like cabin boys almost, where they're like he takes away all their weapons and they're just kind of like working the ship like the rest of the crew, but they have way less like privileges and stuff. So it's an interesting dynamic with that. But Izzy has the option to leave the ship, and he doesn't, of course, because he wants to be there because Ed's there. And Ed is there trying to win Steed back. And while this is happening, they talk a lot about their past together. And Ed is trying to be, buddy-buddy with Izzy, and Izzy's miserable. And just wackiness ensues because there's like in a sense serving Steed and Izzy can't stand him, and Ed's being very sentimental in this one, which is why I picked it for the Edward episode, because it's just a lot in his head about how he feels about Izzy. And
what's the title again? And the
it's
author?
Called Baby Will Be Fine by Oopsie Daisy.
Thank you. And I will pitch, this is a recommendation from Irene Adler, but Tessa also read it during our Steed episode, I believe. It was The Island by
It's so fucking good.
This story is amazing.
I read it after it was wrecked, and it's 80,000 words, so it's like a full novel length thick, and I read it in like 2 days, and then I was so captivated by it. It got me out of my reading slump. For one, I was reading so many things. I'd pick it up. I pick something up. I'd read a chapter and I'd be like, I'm not into this. I'm not into this. I'm not into this. But I read The Island and it hooked me from the very first sentence.
Mm-hmm.
I could not put it down and finished it in 2 days. And then I decided to narrate it for our upcoming minisode. So you will hear the first 3 chapters narrated by me next week on the podcast. I will try to pitch it in the most engaging way possible. It's a little bit confusing. Steed wakes up post season 2 on the island. Happy, he reaches over Ed bed to pull Ed close, and the person who turns over in bed is Izzy and not Ed. And Steed freaks out and is like, holy shit, what's going on? You are dead. You've been dead for months. And Izzy's like, what are you going on about? No. And then they talk and they realize that Izzy is under the impression that he and Steed have moved into this inn together after Ed died. And Steed is like, no. Ed and I moved to this inn after you died. And they realize that there's been a sliding doors sort of situation where the Steed from another universe crossed paths with the Steed that is in the Island universe. And they need to swap places again. And what actually ends up happening is they end up bringing back the Steed and Ed from the other universe. So what you end up with is, in this inn, you end up with Ed, Izzy, and both Steeds. Steed, who lives in the reality where he and Izzy got together, and then Steed, who lives in the reality that he and Ed got together. And the four
if you feel the need for more Steed,
the 4 of them come together. And it is the
so many times they come
wildest.
They all come together.
wildest, unhinged fic I have ever read. It captivated me right away, and the first half of it is very emotional. It's very heavy character development. You're just like with Steed in his confusion, and then there's this really wonderful, meaty awkwardness between Steed and Izzy, and the idea that Izzy and the other Steed had this sort of thing, very tentative love story blooming, and then Steed is also seeing like the things that the other Steed could fall in love with Izzy about. So many intricate character interactions that are just so juicy, so well written,
Very
and it's so
fantastic angst.
Yes, and it's got everything. It has all the emotions, all the angst, all the drama, all the love, all the fluff, and all the smut. All of it.
Yeah, there's about halfway through, so it goes from kind of like a normal plot line, and then about 40,000 words to 80,000 words. It's all just porn.
Every chapter is like a different kind of crazy sex. Yeah, and I love it. It's amazing. This is one of the stories that I wish I could forget having ever read so that I can read it again for the first time. It's just so good. And there's only a couple fanfics that I've ever read like that. And this is one of them.
So check that out next week on the podcast. My narration of the first 2 chapters of The Island. And we got to wrap things up. We've already been talking for 2 hours, which is way too long. So we want to finish with, where can people find you? What are you working on, Dai Booth? And do you have any either social media accounts or things out there that you want people to find? This is your chance to pitch yourself.
So yeah, I've got a website without a professional domain name. It's daibooth.wordpress.com,
Perfect.
which has got basically links to all my books, all my writing, all my social media. And I'm on Instagram, Daibooth Writes. I'm working on, so I've got a couple of stories coming out soon.
Yay!
One in a zine, one in an anthology. And yeah, I'm just currently working on more stuff. It blows my mind when people casually say, oh, it's 80,000 words long. That's a hefty word count to just put out casually. So
yeah, for fanfic.
Respect to fanfic writers.
Yeah, but we appreciate them so much because they do it for free and we thrive on it.
Yeah, they write novels and novels worth.
I mean, to be fair, when you're like a writer, like of original fiction, you don't tend to get paid for it either.
This is
I'm being facetious, but
yeah, ever so slightly more than fan fiction.
Yeah.
So what are you working on and where can people find you?
I'm working on editing a romance novel that, with any luck, I've got a publisher that's just sent me sort of like some revisions, and I'm going to make the revisions, and then I'm going to send them back, and then fingers crossed. And in terms of, I guess, where you can find me, much like last time, don't find me. I'm a ghost. Ooh.
And Ringa, what are you working on? Where can people find you?
You can find me online at Ringasun, RINGASUNN, on every social media. I am working on the Calypso's birthday party that's coming up next week. By the time this comes out, it will be the next Saturday to you, which is May 25th. If you're anywhere near Pittsburgh, you should come. It is free to attend. There's games, prizes, trivia, costumes, drink, torture, sea creatures, shenanigans, gay shit, everything you love. And it's going to be great. And if you like the show or just pirates or just a good time, you will have a great time.
This is the Our Flag Means Fanfiction podcast. If you enjoy this, show the world that Our Flag related content still has an audience by giving us a rating. And if you feel like it, a review. And you can find us on Instagram at Our Flag Means Fanfiction, all one word. Thank you. Bye.